So, hello everyone, and welcome to this event, Jia Pingwa, the Master Storyteller of Rural China. We're very happy that you could join us today, and we prepared a small taster of the things to come, basically, with a little video we prepared. So if you give me 1 second, let me just set that up. Sure. Cool.
贾老师啊，问您一个那个问题，这个调调对吧？我们选的这个调调。
可以。
太好了，太好了。
因为我们这个没有经历过这种丧歌的这种经历，所以选了半天，选了这么一个。
这个歌曲吧，它是实际上还不是这个我小说里面写的这个
那个调调，
但是这个也是他人创作的一个，也是个他很悲凉的一个曲子吧。这个他有的是唢呐来唱的，但是他还没有完整的，如果选的特别完整吧，特别还是不错的。
谢谢。Okay, shall we start?
Okay, let's begin. So welcome everyone. I see there's 126 people now in the Zoom room, as well as all the people that are joining us from Northwest University in Xi'an. So welcome everyone. My name is Daniel. I'll be your host today. And so I thought we'd begin just by offering a quick rundown on who the VIPs we have in attendance today. So first of all, of course, we have the famous contemporary Chinese author, Jia Pingwa 老师, who's joining us. We also have the director of the China National Tourist Office in London, Xue Ling. Hi there. I'm just gonna unmute you. Hi there. And then we have Nikki Harmon joining us.
Hi.
Famous translator, award-winning translator. We have Christopher Payne, the translator and associate chair of Chinese to English to Chinese translation in the University of Toronto. Hi, Christopher.
Hello.
And then we have Xiao Yuan, the deputy editor-in-chief of People's Literature Publishing House. And then we have Mr. Hu Zongfeng from the chairman of Shanxi's Translators Association and the president of Northwest University's Foreign Language College. Hi there.
胡老师在吗？胡老师，刚才看到您了。哦，在那儿举手呢，在那儿，在那儿呢。
And we have, of course, Ian Matheson, the chief publisher of ASIA Publishing, and also David Lemmy joining us for the deputy senior editor. Hi, David.
Hi, David.
And then finally, we have Dr. Robin Gilbank, the associate professor at Northwest University Foreign Language College, again in Xi'an. Hi there.
在那边啊，在那边看见了。
So welcome everyone. At today's event, we're really here to explore the intricacies and to explore and discuss the intricacies of Jia Pingwa's writing. And in order, I think, to really understand Jia Pingwa's writing, we had to first kind of see where he's writing from, and that is Shanxi, and the mountains and rivers in which he hails from. The mountains I mentioned is Qinling, the majestic mountain range, which the cover of The Mountain Whisperer partly took inspiration from. And it's kind of what is commonly considered to divide North and South China.
That's right.
And to give you a bit of introduction on all of this, Xue Ling, the director of the China National Tourist Office in London, will offer a short introduction on the sights and sounds of Qinling.
Let's give applause for Xue 老师.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm from China National Tourist Office, London.
There have been explorations in the blending of culture and tourism since the convergence of the two fields in China in 2018. The UK has many successful cases of this combination, such as Western theatres, film sets turned tourism sites of British literary and artistic significance. Today, CNTO London will join hands with Ellen Charles Asia Publishing to start the journey of rediscovering China in the UK, which among many other aspects, I hope, it will also be an inspiring one in terms of culture and tourism. The journey to China could start from anywhere, it is said. It is also wrote by some backpackers. To visit China, if you want to know the past dozens of years, go to Shenzhen. If you want to know about the past 100 years, go to Shanghai. Or if you want to know about the past 1,000 years, go to Beijing. While today, we will embark a cultural journey to Qinling of Shanxi, dating back 2,000 to 3,000 years. And the journey to China could also start with anything. It can be from poetry, music, dance, theater, arts and crafts, even food and the minute details of everyday life. Today's journey will start with the literature by Mr. Jia Pingwa, one of the well-known writers from Shanxi. Perhaps the novels connected to Qinling Mountains that Mr. Jia Pingwa is familiar with could be the jumping off point into a certain period in the 5,000 years timeline of China. Now, in truth, Shanxi is a place I know mostly from TV, films, and literature. So we hope that we could explore together through the writings of Mr. Jia Pingwa, as well as other channels. So you are also very welcome to delve further into Chinese culture and history by following our social media channels, event landing pages, and watching China Hour on Sky TV 191, which is a regular afternoon program about Chinese culture and history on weekdays. Finally, thank you for your participation, and I hope you enjoy today's Qinling culture journey. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that.
You.
Thank you so much for that. And well, I'm sure the next person that we have coming up needs no introduction. Nikki is the award-winning translator of some of China's most famous authors, chief among which is Mr. Jia Pingwa Laoshi. And if we could just get Nikki on to give a little bit of background on Jia, as well as some of her translations of him, that would be great. Nikki, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Thank you, Nikki.
Okay. Right, well, it's a huge honor to be here talking to you today. Also slightly terrifying, because I can see the number of people who are watching. I'm not going to do anything as grand as talking generally about Jia Pingwa's work. I'm going to give you some personal reflections about how I've experienced him as a reader and as a translator, which I hope will make you really enthusiastic about reading his work. And also talk briefly about the voices of his most notable characters and how we translators recreate them in English. So far, we quite a few of Jia Pingwa's works have appeared in English, starting 1991 with Turbulence, and then from 2014 onwards, Happy Dreams, Ruined Capital, a novella, Backflow River, The Lantern Bearer, Broken Wings, Xinjiang Shanxi Opera, which is forthcoming, and of course the novel we're going to be talking about today, Mountain Whisperer. But the fact remains that Jia Pingwa deserves to be much better known in English translation, and Sinoist Books are doing a huge amount to promote his profile. What's very striking about Jia Pingwa's writing is its range. Even looking at the small corpus, which has been translated, which is a tiny proportion of all his writing. They range from countryside epics to urban stories, and they have a cast of 100 or more characters, or just half a dozen. And these characters range from the ebullient characters you can imagine meeting anywhere to the fey and frankly oddball ones that you will probably only meet in the pages of his books. And unusually for a male writer of his generation, Jia Pingwa has also portrayed some remarkable women characters, though his translation of them has sometimes been controversial. I'm just going to give you a quick flavor of some of the stories in his works. Backflow River, the novella, a couple who rise from rags to riches and then fall back to rags again. Alongside the main storyline, there's the story of the woman's inability to conceive and the sympathy with which Jia Pingwa describes her tragedy and what she tries to do about it is, I think, really remarkable. Another novel set in a city in Xi'an with just a few characters, Happy Dreams. We have Happy Liu, a peasant from the village of Freshwind who's moved to Xi'an, and we follow him and his adventures and his tragedies through the city. He's a kind of Charlie Chaplin character. He has unbridled optimism and a canny self-confidence, and his voice is rather extraordinary because it's a mixture of obscenities and dialect and lyricism. Another story with just a few characters, Broken Wings. There's a young woman, Butterfly, who's been kidnapped from the nearest city and taken to a remote village where she's sold to be, she's sold to a farmer called Bright Black to be his wife. And we follow her through her days of captivity and her attempts to escape and the violent rape to which she's subjected and the birth of her baby. And after she is rescued, she chooses to go back to the village because the villagers have kept her child. But has she really? Has she really been rescued? There's a kind of dreamlike sequence at the end of the novel, and you left wondering, and the reader really has to make up their own mind, which is real. Has she gone back? Has she been rescued? And it's quite an extraordinary story, I think. And then there are the vast panoramas of novels, panoramic novels, which are either set in the city or set in the countryside. Ruined Capital is probably the most famous one, and I would really recommend that to all of you to read. It was written a long time ago, but only translated in 2016. And of course, Mountain Whisperer, which we're here to talk about today. And these have dozens of characters, but they're all really engrossing. As the translator, getting the voice, most Chinese readers, many of whom don't understand the more picturesque dialect phrases in the novels, assume that it's the dialect that poses the biggest challenge when you're translating Jia Pingwa. Actually, I don't agree. I think it's, speaking as a translator, I feel it's really getting those characters' voices to sound authentic in some kind of English. When you're translating dialect and slang, you want to indicate that the characters are not talking in standard, what we call delightfully in English, BBC English, or the equivalent in Chinese, of course. But you can't have them use in English a slang that sounds too local. That's if you're lucky enough to have a regional slang at your disposal in English, which I don't. So butterfly can't sound too much like a South London girl, and happy in Happy Dreams can't sound like a Cockney taxi driver or a Glaswegian bin man. And yet at the same time, you've got to make them sound natural. You've got to make their words come to life. So I'm full of admiration for Jia Pingwa, who is a middle-aged male writer, for bringing Butterfly, a young woman in Broken Wings, to life and giving her a voice that sounds entirely natural. And I love the way he describes this process in his afterword, Broken Wings. It makes it sound a bit like ventriloquism. When I began to write, it was not me writing. I was giving a voice to poor kidnapped Butterfly. She's finished lower middle school, so she has a bit of education and social aspirations. She likes to sprinkle her speech with traditional sayings. She sounds like she knows everything, and yet she knows nothing at all. As she chatters on artlessly, who is she talking to? To me? To the world around her? The word for novel in Chinese is literally small talk. And this novel is a very small talk, but it's not me talking, it's Butterfly. Quite a challenge for Mr. Jia, although I found it easier, perhaps because I'm a female translator. In Happy Dreams, however, the boot was on the other foot, because it was I, the translator, who had to find a new voice in English for Happy Liu, who's this male migrant worker, who cusses with his cronies from the first page to the last. And it had to be convincing. And this is a process that happens with all translations, pinning down how one finds a voice for the narrative and for the narrator. And yet it's especially important when the novel consists of literally one man's voice. So to get a natural voice for Happy, I tried a bit of ventriloquism and let Happy speak through me. I want to finish very quickly. I've mentioned Jia Pingwa's afterword in Broken Wings. You'll find that every novel of his has afterwords, which come, as one would expect, at the back and are extremely illuminating and very accessible. And they're a wonderful way of getting to know the author, how he conceived the book, how he wrote it, the difficulties he faced, how he felt about it, and so on. So my last word is, if you're given a 500-page copy of a Jia Pingwa novel and you feel intimidated and you don't know where to start, go to the afterword and read that first, and then start from the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Nikki.
Thank you.
Amazing, amazing. I think next we'll really want to dive into what makes Jia's works so special, and who better to talk about that than the author himself. I think in the interest of time, in our already packed schedule, we've asked Jia Laoshi to record a short video about him talking to us about some of his works. So I'll just share that now. Give me 1 second.
我是中国作家贾平凹，非常感谢有这样的活动，能与诸位朋友们在这儿见面。我是1953年的生人吧，现在居住在中国的西安。从上个世纪80年代真正开始这个文学写作，至今呢，几十年已经过去了，发表和出版了，估计有1500多万字的作品吧，有诗歌，有散文，有评论，有小说。从上世纪90年代，主要是写长篇小说。写作是我的工作，是我的一种生活的状态。是我思想不断提高、安脱领会的过程，也是我与谁相会的事情。几乎是从上世纪90年代起，我有意识地调整我的写作，就是以我的写作叙述我对中国100年间的认识、感受 或理解。在这100年间，中国是如何走过来的？中国经历了什么？中国人的身体状态或精神状态如何？这是我就文学要表达的。因此呢，我的作品呢，在这100年间各个时期都有书写。当然，他们不是以时间顺序写下来的，而是一会儿写到当今的中国社会现实，一会儿呢又写到上世纪20、30年代，一会儿又写到文化大革命时期。这些作品是交错的，随着我的认识而写出来。它很庞杂，但它有内在的联系，都是中国的这100年间的故事。陕西有一座中国最伟大的山，它叫秦岭。它之所以是中国最伟大的山，它的峰峦，它的沟岔，它的河流和森林，发生在秦岭里中国第一史到如今的事情，它的战争、冰雹、风暴、冰雪、风暴、干旱、水涝、地震、瘟疫，构成了它作为秦岭的存在。我的写作追求呢，也是如此。在这庞杂的写作中，我的长篇小说，大约有20多部吧，其中又写了上世纪90年代的奋斗，又写于当今这个世纪之初的秦腔，或后来的鼓楼、陕北、江豆、青蛙等等。而由英国茶室出版有限公司出版的英译本的这个赞助计划鼓楼老师，就是其中一部分。我的写作基本上没有离开过陕西，我是以我的故乡或我从上世纪70年代就开始工作或生活的西安作为写作基地的。我是站在这2个地方来观察中国，来认识中国或理解中国。作为当代文学真正书写的是从上世纪80年代开始的。改革开放呢，使我们学习了西方现代文学，而改变了我们的思维，扩大了我们的视野，提高了我们的境界。当代中国文学的写作可以说没有现代意识是不可想象的，而如何将现代的意识与中国的社会现实结合起来，写出属于中国的色彩和声音的作品，这是我一直在追求的。鼓楼呢是文化大革命的故事，这本书是以文化大革命的故事。文化大革命虽然已经过去了，但文化大革命留给我们思考的东西太多。它的发生或许有这样那样的原因，但文化大革命如何能在中国发生，会出现那么多荒唐、残酷的事情、不可理喻的事情，它的社会的土壤危机是最值得我们思考的。人的危机、人性的危机、气质的危机，如果不解决这些，文化大革命呢，很可能发生过了一次，也可能发生第2次、第3次。这是我写鼓楼的凑作。计划呢是一部很短的长篇小说，它的故事呢发生在陕西的北部。因为陕西这块土地呢，它是囊括了所有的这个地理表现吧，有这个江南的这个风貌，一直到山脊，一直到这个平原，一直到高原，一直到沙漠。他这个计划的故事吧，基本上就写的陕西北部的事情。因为这个在中国呢，中国是一个农业大国，在中国人的思维可以从一个角度来讲，现在的思维吧，也可以都是农民的思维。所以说 读懂了中国龙曲，才能真正的读懂中国。说21世纪以来，中国龙曲在发生着千帆极复的变化。中国呢，随着这个现代化的进程，传统的东西它基本上在衰微，在衰败。而在这个社会大变的时期，它这个总会发生一代或者2代人的这个利益的牺牲啊，或者他们的不幸啊，作为这个代价的，激化的就是一个令我们心碎的故事，至于老生这一部长篇，老生的跨度时间是比较长的一部长篇小说，它基本上从上个世纪的20-30年代一直到写下当代，它基本上这一本书，它的表现形式吧，就和我中国的文学的构成吧，它是同步的，它是跨度比较长的。这一部小说的书写过，就是要看我们是从哪里过来的，我们是如何一步一步走过来的，我们要到什么地方去。他可以看整个将近100年之间中国人的脚步，中国人的道路。说这个战作呢，它是最先进的作品，它是写了现在中国城市里一群这个人的生活状态，他们是怎么活着，他们是怎么这个活着才最有意义和尊严，从这方面来写的。所以我一直在强调，现代意识是一条河流，它在中国的土地上流过的时候，它是如何冲跨着两岸，是如何过斜着这个泥沙，是如何改变着地理和气候，又是如何滋润着这一块土地的草木和它的庄稼的。这就是我自己的创作。我的小说以现代意识贯穿我的文学，以中国特有的形式来书写我的作品，它是由日常的描写来反映当代中国的。所以说这一次会议吧，我是非常的高兴，在这里吧也是衷心的再一次感谢这个著名的翻译家将我的作品翻译着这个计划呀、赞作呀、鼓楼啊、老生。这个再一次的感谢英国茶室出版有限公司出版这些作品，并举办了这一次活动。再一次感谢参加会议的诸位朋友，谢谢。
谢谢贾老师信任我们，谢谢，太谢谢您了。那个right. To the audience, who I noticed someone raised their hand earlier on. I'm sure everyone has a lot of questions, and if you, but we have a dedicated Q&A section at the very end of this event. So if you could just pop your questions into the chat, we have someone looking at that right now, and then we'll get to that at the end. I think next we'll hand this off to Christopher, if I just unmute, and to talk about some of the interesting challenges and characters he bumped into while rendering the translation of The Mountain Whisperer. Can you hear us, Christopher?
Yes.
Perfect.
Great.
Well, thanks everyone for coming out today. I'm going to start. I've been teaching everything online at University of Toronto this year, video recorded lectures. So I always start good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, because I'm not sure where people are. And I think today we actually have everyone in those time zones. So 早安, 午安, 晚安 to everyone. And 谢谢贾老师 for coming here and speaking to us on a Friday evening. It's really wonderful to hear you speak. And I'm sure there'll be lots of Q&A coming up. I had initially planned to have kind of a more academic lecture. I think when scholars kind of not sure what to do, they fall into the old trap of speaking academically. But after listening to the discussions thus far and Nikki's earlier kind of thoughts about translating Jia Pingwa, I thought I'd be a little bit more personal. And for me, you mentioned something about not much of his work being translated. As an undergraduate student, we were introduced to Jia Pingwa, to Yu Hua, to Su Tong, all of the writers that came out of the 1980s during the Wenhua Re, right? The culture fever and all of these types of things. And that was the period of literature we knew most about. And to then eventually have the opportunity to translate Jia Laoshir's work has been, I mean, probably one of the greatest things I've ever had the opportunity to do, and kind of being involved in bringing this work to an audience outside of China, into an English-speaking audience, has been really enjoyable. And the mention of dialect and the challenge of this from a translator's perspective, I actually do have lots of dialects to work with. I'm originally from Newfoundland, so if anybody knows that part in Canada, it's unique in terms of its dialects. There are many different types that are here. And then I studied in London, so I heard RP, right, the BBC English, not very much, but I heard some of it. Then I spent many years in Manchester, and let me tell you, in Manchester, they speak a unique English altogether. So it's been a lot of this, the different voices and stuff. And I think that's really informed upon, for me, a way to kind of get into giving a voice to Jia Laoshir's characters that he has in his books, and trying to bring that to life, to give it a feel to an English language reader. And that's really, I think, for me at least, that's a big focus, is this idea of thinking about my target audience. As the translator, I want people to be able to read these books and enjoy them. I think there is a place for what Appia calls a thick translation, where you have lots of footnotes and all of this infrastructure around it for people to understand and get into the details of the history and culture. I think that's important, and there is a place for that. But at the same time, I'm also a big believer that a novel, you should be able to pick it up and enjoy it, and not necessarily have to thumb to the endnotes at the back of the book to try and figure out exactly what's being there. So that means for me, I've tried to, at moments where there are specific things in Jia Laoshir's work, and certainly I've only worked on Laoshan, but certain elements in it that maybe the reader does need a little bit more context, I've tried to incorporate that into the actual text itself. So translation by addition, as the case might be, in order to kind of flesh those ideas out, so we don't have to search for footnotes or endnotes at the back of the book or at the bottom of the page. And the characters in The Mountain Whisperer, I think they're brilliant. I mean, you have characters like Lao Hei, you have the commander, who have all of these distinct kind of very powerful personalities. Most of them are men, the main characters in it. So I try to, I guess, really take that forward and kind of present this kind of rough, rural type of experience of the Qingling Mountains. And I will admit, it's a place I've never actually been to myself. I've seen pictures of it, and I tried to put myself there. So the videos earlier on kind of gave me more visualization of those types of things. But these were some of the elements that I thought about with trying to put myself into the voice of the characters in Laoshan. And I've actually had a couple of students, because I've talked about this in my classes, ask me about the title. So I thought I would speak a few moments on the title, The Mountain Whisperer. Where does that come from? Because of course the Chinese is Laosheng, it's old life, old person, whatever you wish to call it. But for me, the one of the central characters is Chang Shi, who is a singer, and he sings he sings funeral songs mostly. He sings these dirges, and he pops up throughout the entire novel, and it's great because sometimes it switches from third person to first person, and then he's kind of ruminating on his experiences and stuff. And I thought that calling it a singer, it wasn't enough. So that I kind of thought around with different ideas, and I don't know why it came to me, but I thought of the Horse Whisperer, which was a movie about the ability of a character to speak a language that's not human, right? To speak to non-human things. In this case, it was a horse. And as I was reading Lao Sheng in advance of translating it, the character, to my mind, he's speaking to the mountains, he's speaking to Qinling, he's speaking to Shanxi, he's speaking to all of those characters. And it's that idea of having this access to the knowledge of the land itself is what made me think of, well, the mountains play such a significant part in Jia Laoshi's work. As he says in the video earlier on, he's in Shanxi, he's never really left Shanxi. And it's certainly true in all of his novels. And so he speaks to them. And so I thought about this, and I thought maybe Mountain Whisperer, playing on this idea of the horse whisperer, would be a good choice for the title. And of course, I brought it to the editors, and they approved. That's why it's titled that at the end of the day. We had a couple of different working titles for it at the beginning, but we settled on Mountain Whisperer. And I think it does encapsulate that idea that Jia has with speaking to Shanxi, just speaking to the Qingling Mountains and giving a voice to that, this geographical area that plays such an important role, has such a significant history in China more broadly, and so on. So I hope the title works in English. I hope it gets people to say, what's this? And actually draws them in. And that was another consideration for my target audience. Titling a book The Singer seems a little bit, mundane. There's lots of books out there that are The Singer, but I haven't found another book that's called The Mountain Whisperer. So hopefully that will tag it in and people will be interested and wonder, what is this about? And if that makes them open it up and be introduced to Jia Laoshi's works, well then as a translator, hopefully then I've succeeded in doing that. Because I think Nikki is absolutely right that we haven't had enough of Jia Laoshi's work translated, that there's not enough out there in English for us to read. And I would like my, other undergraduate students to have more of his stuff to read. So hopefully we've been able to do a little bit of that. I'm not probably I could say more. I could probably go on. If you listen to any of my students, they'll tell you he goes on and on and on. But I'm going to switch it over because I think I'm conscious of the time, and we have a very large pool here. We have a big audience, and I would like to turn it over to Q&A and give you a chance to ask questions of either myself or of Jia Laoshi, or Nikki is still here, so you can ask her questions too, I'm sure. So thanks everyone for coming. Thanks for being here. And I'll open up the floor. And Daniel, I think you said that somebody is watching the chat box.
I think we have 2 more things after this, and then we'll open it up to the floor, definitely.
Okay.
Thank you so much for that, Christopher. As having sat in on some of the conversations around like the formulation of the name, definitely it was quite the inspired choice, I would say. And so now that we talked so much about the book, I think it's time to give you a hint of what's to expect in The Mountain Whisperer. And we're asking the editor for this title, David, our very own David Lammy, to give a reading of The Mountain Whisperer. And it comes from the beginning of the book, doesn't it, David?
Yes, Daniel, it does. Thanks very much.
And just before David, I'm going to say I have to announce to everybody, thank you so much, David, for your help with editing. It wouldn't have been completed without you.
I thought you forgot, Christopher.
No, I didn't forget at all.
I was waiting for that.
Thanks, Christopher. Yes, you're right. This is a short section from near the beginning of the book. It isn't actually typical of much of the rest of it. It's more of a sort of moment of calm before the more turbulent and often violent events that follow. So we have the Mountain Whisperer as a very old man in a cave on his deathbed, really. And he is, the only people who know he's there are a shepherd and the son of that shepherd who go in to see him, but they need to return to their flock. So they ask the grandson of the shepherd to look in on him and stay with him in his final days. And this is where we pick it up. And so, after he returned, the boy stood vigil. At first, he stayed away from the prone figure in the bed, but after some time passed and he became more comfortable, he went to look at the Mountain Whisperer more closely. The old man's eyes were shut tight, and the boy believed perhaps he'd already died. He stretched out his hand to feel for breath under the man's nose and was surprised to discover he was still alive. Over the next few days, this became his routine, his ritual, constantly checking to see if the Mountain Whisperer was hanging on. But boys become distracted easily, and soon he grew bored with the monotony, deciding to look for something else to do instead. Strangely, perhaps, his mind turned to his studies, particularly classical Chinese, especially since he was disappointed with his grade. The time he spent in the Mountain Whisperer's cave thus became the time for him to study. To this end, he begged his father to find him a tutor so he could get academic help he needed. His father agreed and negotiated a suitable fee. For his effort and time, the tutor would be given 5 jin of wool, equivalent to about half a kilogram. As for the tutor, he was learned and erudite, his knowledge encompassing diverse fields, especially those of the ancients. The text he brought with him was Pathways Through the Mountains and Seas. Their schedule was set. He would come once each day, and they would study 2 passages each time. Despite being bedridden, the Mountain Whisperer's ears were alive and trained on what was happening around him. His mind was clear and attentive too. He therefore listened carefully to the lessons the boy received. As he did so, the wind would occasionally force its way into the cave, bringing with it the blanket of white clouds, enshrouding the place in an eerie mist. There was also a strange scent carried on the air. Butterflies would flutter about. It was a very odd scene indeed. Now, the Mountain Whisperer had sung songs all his life. His words had told the tales of the past and future dynasties. But he'd never read Pathways Through the Mountains of Seas. He'd never even heard of it before. But here, as he lay in bed, the teacher was speaking of the mountains, the seas, and the stories they held. He'd never seen the ocean and had no idea of its size, but this didn't stop the folk of Jinling from talking about the seas, even if they were more inclined to believe they were not much bigger than a reasonably large bowl. But mountains, well, he'd been to all the local ones, had traversed every valley and stream. In truth, was there any cliff he did not know? The old man so wanted to join their conversation, but his body was failing him. He didn't even have the strength to twist his tongue, let alone form words. All he could do was keep on breathing, sometimes hurriedly, sometimes more slowly. The only feeling he experienced was that hair upon his head continued to grow, as did the hair on his arms and legs, akin to wild grass. Although he couldn't move, he could hear the room alive with sounds. The ants were mustering at the foot of his bed, preparing for their advance. The wings of butterflies flapped rapidly, uninterrupted, then whooshed away. At times, the young boy would be lost in the swirl of butterflies, longing to reach up and catch some. But each and every time he thought of doing so, the teacher would wrap his pen over the boy's head and scold him. Concentrate. Once the butterflies left the cave, they'd perch on the underbrush outside and soon transform into flowers.
Thank you so much for that,
David. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Wow, I'm sure that was a very exciting book to edit. Finally, we have Dr. Robin Gilbank of Northwest Xi'an University. But to give you an idea of what he's going to talk about, he's going to give you a flavor of the foods of Xi'an, and which features very heavily in Jia Laoshi's writings. Can everyone see? Perfect, perfect.
Sorry. Thank you, Daniel. I was asked to prepare something on a topic that I know something about. Or they chose this topic for me. I'm not sure what made them think that I know a lot about the food of this province. I'm going to talk a little bit about wheat and noodles. We already saw earlier in the short film of Mr. Jia, we saw one kind of wheat flour bread. This province and what we might call Qinling, this area, is a land of wheat, not so much rice. And the local dialect preserves a rich history of milling flour to be utilized as bread or noodles. One of the ancient characters is Mo, which it means a flatbread, and it features, for instance, in one local delicacy, the Rojia Mo, a kind of braised pork sandwich. Well, that's a debatable translation. In his latest novel, Mr. Jia has also been, he's been doing a bit of sort of myth making, which is something he commonly does. He claims, apocryphally, I guess, that in the 3rd century BC, the armies of Qin triumphed over the 6 rival states and then created the first empire in China, partly because of their superior horses and partly because of their battlefield cuisine. While the enemies were busy steaming rice and preparing vegetables, the Qin merely broke ready-made flatbreads into cubes and drenched them in mutton broth to make yangrou pangmo. Mr. Jia's writings also abound with literally dozens of different types of wheat flour noodles. Bian bian noodles feature in several stories. The name is composed of what is said to be the most complicated character of all in the Chinese language. In its most simple form, it's got 57 brush strokes. This is a good party trick. After about 10 glasses of baijiu, if you can write this, it's quite a status symbol. But it doesn't have such an ancient heritage. If you look back to the most famous dictionary of the 18th century, it doesn't appear. So there's some speculation as to where the name of this dish, or the character, came from. It could very well be that it dates back to around the year 1900, when the Dowager Empress and the court of the last dynasty fled to Xi'an and were taking refuge here. So there's evidence that a lot of local businesses, a lot of restaurants and so on, made up little myths or little ditties, you might say, to attract their attention and hopefully their much coveted patronage. So it could be that this very complicated character was designed for her eyes, or the eyes of some VIPs. And we know that she was very fond of mutton, certainly. So I want to mention just finally 2 other essays of Mr. Jia, which kind of express the course of his life through the figure of the ubiquitous noodle. I was going to write that it's a common strand in his writing, but I thought that was a bit of a bit lame. In one of his essays, I'm Not a Good Son, he bemoans his lack of filial feeling as a boy. When he and his younger brother refused to turn the millstone in the evening, his adroit mother had to find ways of stirring them into action. He writes that his mother, his poor old mother, she was trying to get them to turn it. She was too short to be able to push it on her own, and they would just fall asleep, and she would have to prod them and get them moving. So the making of noodles, the laboriousness of making the flour to produce noodles, becomes a kind of a symbol of that harsh childhood. But more recently, in another essay, From Dihua to Xi'an, noodles are used as a means of registering a common thread in his work. That's to say, urbanization and progress. So where Mr. Jia comes from is about 2 to 3 hours east of the city of Xi'an, where he lives. So he tries to go there back there as often as he can, because his younger brother and sister-in-law and other relatives still live there. So in this essay, he talks about the opening of the 312 highway, which links Xi'an and the city of Shangluo, not so far from his village. So he sort of says, well, I can ring my brother in the morning. Then I can get in my car and drive back home. And but before I go, I can phone him and I can say, what are we going to have for lunch? And he can make the noodle dough, pull the noodles and cook them. And miraculously, they're ready for him when he arrives. So by the time his car gets there at lunchtime, freshly milled flour has become piping hot noodles, and the scene is set for some warm fraternal reminiscence. Okay, I'll finish there.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm just gonna.
That really make my mouth watering.
Yeah, as someone who hasn't had lunch yet, that was really unfair. Thank you so much for that, and I think we'll really just open this up now to the generalized Q&A of this program. And really, we've had a couple of people who've already emailed through some questions beforehand.
Mr. Professor Huang.
Oh, hi, Professor Huang. Well, I'll just thought I'll read a few out and then see if Jia Laoshi could maybe give us his thoughts on them. 贾老师听得见吗？
Yeah.
好的。等一下，我在这边读这个英文，就您那边的翻译，给您翻译过去好吗？
好的。
好。So this is from the Zhang Dailei from the Xinhua News Agency, and just out of all of his works in English translation, which one does he think has had the most impact?
这个英语本吧，就是这个，因为我自己不懂英语，因为这个有些情况吧也了解的不是很多的，但是在之前的英语本里边，据我了解的吧，就是高兴啊、计划，这还是影响比较好的，因为也曾经收到过好多这个来自外国一些读者的一些反馈的一些材料嘛，你比如说这个有印度的呀，有这个印度的也多，当时这个计划翻译成这个在墨西哥吧，也反馈回了好多东西。当时这个非洲翻译出来以后吧，这个也有好多反响，别的到我还都不了解情况了。这个老师出来以后吧，当然希望更多的读者们能看到他，能喜欢他。
Right.
I will do a simple interpret. So, Jia just said he is not good at English, but the happy dreams and the broken wings, he has also received some good reflection, and he has received some interesting comments from India, and also broken wings in Mexico. Has the same circumstances, and about the ruined cities, has also received some good reflection, But other works he don't know, and the new book, The Mountain Whisperer, has been issued, so he hopes he will receive more and more comments and to help his writing period. Just like this.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Next one is from Huang Wen, a US-based author and translator. And his question is
黄老师跟大家招一下手吧，黄老师。
Would you like to ask the question, Huang 老师?
Yeah, it probably is a good idea. You asking the question yourself rather than pass it on. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. I was born in Xi'an. I was raised in Xi'an, and I live in Chicago. 姜老师，我是芝加哥的一个作家。我们有一个共同的一个朋友，你不认识。有一次他到美国来，我说你给我买一本西安特产，他给我送了一本你的书，而你还给我签过名，是叫施炳银施院长。We had a mutual friend, but Mr. Jia doesn't know me. So when he came to Chicago, I said, could you bring me a Xi'an specialty? And he brought me a book and then signed by Mr. Jia and to me. And when I heard about it today, I was really excited and had the book. But my question is, why do you choose a professional mourner as the chief narrator to connect the four stories? What's the cultural and spiritual significance of it? 就是你的这个在这本书里面啊，用一个嚎丧者呢作为你的一个精神主线，把这个4个故事连起来，它的精神意义和文化意义在哪？
对。谢谢黄先生，你这个那个施院长嘛，也介绍过你，这个你谈到这一件吧，就是这个有一个这个唱丧歌的，当时这个在陕西来讲吧，这种人叫唱小歌，就是小水那个小歌，也是丧歌这个意思。以这个人作为故事的串联吧，实际上他的文化形式意义吧是个啥？就是这一本书吧，基本上就写这100年间，这个中国人是怎么走过来的，中国人怎么走过来的。中国人的身体状况和精神状况是怎么样的？选择这个唱丧歌的人作为这个串联吧，它更能体现这个作品的一个基调。这个基调吧，它就是苍凉的，我这个悲苦的，也悲苦的。从这个意义上，从这个意义上来讲吧，说这本书吧，它也是中规思维。
贾老师，您得停一下，让您的翻译帮您翻一翻，要不时间太久了他就忘了。您说一段，然后让他翻译一段。Sorry，
Thank you for your question. And she has mentioned you, but sorry, I can't remember it. And I choose the funeral singer as the main person in this book. And the book just writes a story of the 100 years period. And it just shows the spirit circumstances for Chinese people. For the books, the basic voice is sadness but splendid.
这个意思，这个唱丧歌的人串联吧，他们叫就可以，然后就贯穿一个很悲凉的、很悲苦的、很苍凉的这种调子。从这一点吧，它就更能这个表现这个是中规文化背景之下的人的身体状况和他的精神状
况。For this, it's easier to show the Chinese background of it.
基本完了。
That is finished.
Right. Thank you very much for that. I think next we have a question from Professor Teng. Can you hear us, Professor Teng?
Yes, I can.
He's from a Beijing foreign language university.
Film.
But
Film production university.
Apologies. Beijing Film University. Apologies.
Okay. It's okay. 贾老师，我先用中文问，好吧？我先用中文问。那就是说，比如说最近呢，这些年，您的很多的小说呢都被翻译成这个英文了。因为我本人呢也做这个英语的翻译，小说的翻译。那么我想问一下您呢，就是说您认为目前哪一部小说呢？在您看来，翻译最令人满意是吧？最令您满意的一本小说。这是第一个问题，我自己来翻译一下吧。So, among all your works translated into English, which one of them do you find acceptable and most fascinating, and especially fascinating and appealing to Western readers? 我还有一个问题，第二个问题，那就是在现在几部英文小说当中呢，我认为吉花的翻译是比较出色的。您个人是否认同我的这个感觉是吧？我再翻译一下。So in my opinion, Broken Wings translation stands out quite prominently. Do you agree to this opinion of myself? Thank you very much.
对，那回答一下吧。这个第一个问题吧，你认为是哪一部英语作品吧，就是我比较满意的。但非常遗憾，我自己不懂英语，自己也看不懂，翻译过来我也不知道。但是这个第二个问题吧，就是这个你谈到这个计划，虽然我自己不懂英语吧，但是翻译是收到以后吧，也请教过周围有好多翻译家，就是文学院的一些老师啊，或者一些懂英语的一些学者，他们看了以后吧，他对这个计划也是评价非常好的，非常好的。所以说我特别要感谢这个韩冰女士吧。这个总体来讲吧，别的因为自己都不懂，都不懂，只能听旁边反馈回来的意见。大家对这个在以前吧，是现在出版过的吧，对计划还是挺满意的。
Well, the first question, because I don't understand English, so every book translated into English, I really don't know. So I can't choose which one is my favorite. And for the second one, although I don't understand English, but I just asked some professor, all of them just said the Broken Wings is it's my community. And yes, I think I should listen more and more others' comments from it. So I agree with you. Choose the Broken Wings is the best one.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you. I think next I'll open up a question from the floor, and it's actually directed at both of the translators. And this one's from Lei Chen. To Christopher, how did you get this translation project, if you don't mind me asking? And to both, any advice for people who's looking to enter the field?
I actually replied a little bit in the chat box to Lele, just because I wasn't sure of time. So I kind of explained it there. So Nikki, if you would like to add detail, I just said, I mean, I've worked with Sinoist Books and they purchased the rights and so on. But as for getting started, it was about answering calls for submissions in getting started with trying out. It's a lot of grunt work at the beginning of trying to get, samples out there and get people interested and notice it. And then hopefully you build up a positive momentum after some of your samples are out there. So a lot of it is just translating by yourself or with colleagues or friends or whatever. And hopefully it will kind of morph into something more.
I mean, this is In my experience in translators groups in the UK, this is the most frequently asked question with translators working from any language. I think what more experienced translators usually say is network, network, and network. Make lots of friends in the translation community. Get help, get support. Translators are a very generous community and often willing to mentor emerging translators and help people get started. Specifically, the website, the not-profit website that I work on as a volunteer, Paper Republic, paperrepublic.org, has resource pages for translators who want to start. And that's a good place to start. It's also good to read what other translators are translating from Chinese and where they're getting things published. It's a long, slow process, but I hope you'll be rewarded in the end.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Next, we have one question from Europe Times.
Yeah, this is
a journalist from Europe Times.
So this was sending to me in Chinese, and is 请问贾老师，关于您的作品中女性主义和女性议题，在集花中，您通过女孩子被拐卖，抛弃了当今中国农村的婚姻问题，在老生和其他的作品中，读者看到了一个个身负中华传统美德、保守纯洁、美丽善良的女性的形象。她们即使在遭遇践踏之后，仍能秉持着中国的传统美德，而从不怨恨。请问您希望塑造的这类女性形象，是否也是您想推崇的女性主义？这类保守纯洁的女性模范，是否与当今社会的女性观念有所脱节？您对此有什么看法？ It's a very long question.
So I'll just offer a very brief translation for that. And Nikki, call me out if I translate it wrong. So in Broken Wings, obviously it's about kidnapping women from the cities into a rural and finding husband for them. And obviously in The Mountain Whisperer, there are very many kind of strong female characters who, despite all that happens to them, still maintains a sort of dignity, essentially, that is very kind of traditional to Chinese culture. I mean, to the question to Jia Laoshi is that like, do you subscribe, I guess, to this thought of
try to
promote this kind of femininity, and does it kind of does it detach, I guess, from today's like contemporary viewpoints on feminism?
对，你翻译吧。因为这个自己吧写过各种女性的，其中吧就是有这个身负这个中华传统美德的女性形象，但是也有这个具有这个现代意识的现代女性的形象，现代女性形象。那赋予这个传统美德的女性形象吧，比如说这个计划里边的，在计划里边，女主人公，我这个在这个老生里边也写都有，而这个现代女性就后来就写到咱所这一部小说里边、小说里边就有，因为这个中国社会吧，它发生着千番几复的一种变化。发生千番几复的变化，中华传统那些东西吧，一些东西吧，在逐渐的在衰微了。所以说，这个那些具有中华传统美的那些女性形象吧，普遍的她的遭遇都是不幸的。这个 而这个在占座子里边写到这个现代具有现代意识这些女性的，同样的，她们有她们的目前的一些尴尬地方，她们的烦恼，她们的痛苦，她们的无奈，和她们的这个生存的一些尴尬的事情吧，烦苦的事情。因为中国社会目前它是一个多元化社会，特别多元吧，新的东西和旧的东西交织在一块儿，为其特别复杂，所以说自己就想在这个时代吧，把这个各种女性吧，喜欢在写这个时代这种复杂性，所以各种女性其实都有。正因为写那个传统女性，在我骨子里边，我还是推崇那些女性的。正因为，但是这些有传统美质的女性呢，在当今社会里边，她往往是遭遇到很多不幸的，她也是一个悲凉的一个被毁灭的象征。
Well, I write all kinds of women in my works. Some of them are ordinary, but some of them are the modern women. Especially in the Mountain Whisper, you can see the traditional Chinese women in it, but in 占座 it also shows the modern image, the image of modern women. But in Chinese society, everything has changed, especially for some traditional virtues, it's decreased. So, in my opinion, the women are always in traditional, and the end of them are always a tragedy. Like 占座, the image of the modern women, they also have some embarrassed moments and some happy moments. And it's a new and old combination, so it's complex. It's hard to describe it. I promote the traditional one, but the end of them is always misfortunate. So it's a kind of symbol of the ruin. Yeah. Was it clear?
Thank you so much for that. Thank you very much. I think we'll have one more question from the floor.
Yeah.
And this one is from Anna Gustafsson, the translator Anna Gustafsson. And it's, I really like the way Jia Laoshi highlights one specific craft or folk art in almost all of his works. Opera in Qingqiang, paper cutting in Broken Wings, Mulian in White Nights, and so on. As I understand it, The Mountain Whisperer is about funeral dirges. Was it difficult to find the right words and expressions when translating those parts? And I think I'll just offer a quick translation. 所以呢，贾老师的每一本书，贾老师您的每
这个跟安娜让安娜姐跟大家打一个招呼吧。
Hi Anna, just
Hi Anna, can you just shaking?
Okay. Hi. Hello.
So 在您的那个作品里，每一本书里都有一种专门的怎么说呢，俗世的艺术，俗世的艺术啊，就是比如说在《菊花》里，您有剪纸，在那个在民俗式的民俗，在秦腔里有那个歌，就是 traditional 的歌。在那个老生里是专门就是唱丧歌的。这个在您的写的过程之中呢，有没有任何困难？之后完了以后就比如找对的词儿或者用的东西，有没有任何这样的
Maybe Anna translate into Chinese better than you do. Maybe Anna can say that in Chinese. Yeah, in Chinese as well.
This is actually a question for the translator, you know. Translating these things can be quite difficult because you don't have the same traditions and you may not have the same expressions and the same cultural background, so it's extremely difficult to translate. 这个问题实际上是给翻译给译者对翻译的问题。 是不是翻译有困难？就是说，因为没有这个专门的词这一方面的民族习惯呢。
Yeah, that I think is a question directed more towards me. And yeah, it was a challenge at first because the funeral traditions or funeral music in English don't really correspond to the style of songs that the Mountain Whisperer is singing, the dirges in a Chinese context. So it was a challenge at first to find the appropriately mournful words. There's lots of mournful words in English, but they didn't always correspond because, of course, most of mournful words in English are going to be directed towards Christianity and have Christian kind of allusions and so on. And that didn't really work, I didn't feel. So my adjustment there was to incorporate more of a rural feel. If so much of the story is in the Qingling Mountains and so on. So I tried to scour through and find words that would work along the lines of these more folk ballads or folk tunes, which could be a little bit bawdy at times. And that might seem, how does that work in a funeral dirge? But then I thought about, you know, singing sad songs as my background, on my mom's side, it's a sailor's background. And so they use lots of sad songs, but they're also a bit bawdy at times. To mourn ships lost at sea and these types of things. So I tried to, I know it's Mountain Whisperer is very agrarian, is very much the land, but I tried to find elements there that could work. So that's, I guess, part of how I brought the words, these dirges, into English via that means, as opposed to taking funeral songs, which would be more Christian orientated. So I hope that answers your question. Great.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Thank you. I think really we're running a little bit over time here, and we thought we'd just like to once again thank all the partners of this event. Obviously, Jia Pingwa 老师 and
谢谢贾老师今天出来
这么努力的
能够出席今天的晚会。
之后雪玲主任 Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you, Nikki.
And thank you, Christopher.
Yeah.
Thank you, Xiao老师for making all this possible.
Well, I want to add a little bit more here with People's Literature People's Literature Publishing House. And this project was sponsored by People's Literature Publishing House. So thank you, Xiao Zong. Thank you very much. We really appreciate all the support we got here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
so
you.
Much. Thank you, Hu Lao Shi, for making.
This is great.
Yeah.
This is a really great audience turned out.
Definitely.
It's really, really hugely appreciated.
Indeed.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Hu. Yeah.
And then obviously thank you, David.
Thank you, David.
Reading.
Yeah.
And then thank you, Dr. Gilbank, for that presentation on the food, which I look forward to getting into my lunch now. And we also like to raise thanks for all the supporters and sponsors of this event, especially Northwest University, People's Literature Publishing House, the Jia Pingwa Institute, Guanghua Bookstore, as well as the and special support given by Rediscovered China in the UK. Thank you very much for all your help. I think this event will definitely go up afterwards onto our social media. So if just in case you missed it, we'll definitely push that up again. And Ying, would you like to add anything?
Well, I'm fine. Yeah, okay. All I'm saying is thank you very much. You know, this today is a huge turnout. I was so pleased. This is, the turnout is really amazing. We have altogether, we have about 180 people, plus all the classroom down there, that must be over 100 people there. And also, very, very, from our database here, we can see there is over 2,000 people have opened our invitation, saw our advertising of this event. And also we have 360 people sign-ups.
Yes.
So which is a huge success. Thank you all. And, hopefully this gave us a great encouragement, for the future events like this. And we hope we can see you with the next time events. Thank you.
And make sure to follow us on all our socials, Instagram, Twitter, and WeChat. Yes, indeed. Can't forget about that.
Yeah.
And hopefully this book itself will come out soon, and it will be available in both these beautiful hardbacks as well as ebooks online at a bookseller of your convenience. Yeah. So if any of this sounded interesting to you, please do go into your local bookstores and maybe make a pre-order. That'd be wonderful. And
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right. Thank you
everyone for coming.